Tom Hanks trades in Wilson for Chappie in the new Apple original movie Finch. Grab your solar panels and let's dive into this sci-fi drama. On a post-apocalyptic Earth, a robot built to protect the life of his creator's beloved dog learns about life, love, friendship, and what it means to be a human. This has a very sparse cast, with Tom Hanks in the human role and the voice talent of Caleb Landry Jones playing the robot that Hanks' Finch creates to take care of his dog. Now, the majority of the ozone above the US has just been obliterated, making the sun's UV rays shine down unencumbered, which also makes going out in the sun a deadly adventure. Finch is an engineer who's extremely intelligent and inventive. He's learning to survive in a place that's pretty much just unsurvivable. And because of the large amount of radiation that's just pounding the Earth, the life expectancy of people isn't too long. So to be preemptive, Finch builds a robot that will take care of his dog in the event that he dies. Comparing this performance to Hanks' Castaway is pretty easy, as we have the actor in a sole role being resourceful in order to survive. And this, though, has the added benefit of a robot that takes on human characteristics and, most importantly, has a voice to communicate with Finch. The journey of this story begins when a massive storm comes where Finch is living, causing the need to leave to find a better area in which to live. The landscapes and city designs are desolate and sometimes foreboding, and they help to contribute to a lonely atmosphere. We're also told of unseen threats that could be lurking in the shadows, which slightly build an air of dread. Now, because this is a post-apocalyptic world where everything has pretty much been abandoned and food is scarce, the movie mildly resembles The Road that starred Viggo Mortensen, but this one is much less dark and dreary. There are a few opportunities within the story where this could become more grim and hopeless, but even when there's an ominous tone that begins, the story doesn't linger there too long. For me, I liked that this was a post-apocalyptic story that didn't dwell in the depression, but instead focused more on a hopeful journey. But that being said, I can also see how this is a little disappointing in the fact that the narrative doesn't effectively utilize the tension and the dread that it begins to establish. I think your reaction is going to depend on the type of story that you're hoping this will be. Now, to match the not too sinister tone of the movie, there's a good amount of humor that is infused with the robot. And sometimes it's through movements, and other times it's with the words also. But each time, Hanks is there to provide the added human element that really does complete the humor. And while it's funny to see some of the robots' actions, the real humor comes from Finch's response to those situations. And some of the reactions are sarcastic, with a lot of them just displaying exasperation, but without condemnation. There's a surprising amount of heart that's also displayed in this movie. Tom Hanks is compelling in his performance, I mean, that's expected, but it's the emotion of the story that really surprised me. We're watching a fairly simple journey of a man, his dog, and a new robot companion. And the robot really does take on a life within the narrative, becoming a character as real and sympathetic as Finch. Now, the music in this is an interesting mix. I mean, at times, it adds a whimsical atmosphere to it, which is cute, but it's odd, especially given the dire nature of some of the circumstances that we see. And a few times, the music was just a complete mismatch to the feeling of the scene. But in other times, the score was beautiful and it helped to accurately convey the emotion. The special effects and practical effects are also very convincing in the way that the robot is executed. The design is incredibly complex, but the movie doesn't get bogged down by the tech that's involved in building it out. Instead, the story focuses on the Pinocchio aspect of the robot, where it strives to be more and more human. And whether that's simply by learning to walk and then through more complex tasks like driving or even playing fetch with the dog. All of these actions provide moments of character growth for both the robot and then Finch. And these aspects also help to humanize the robot, endearing him to us through each passing moment. The way the movie executes this and the feelings that I got from watching the relationship between the two grow reminded me of the movie Robot and Frank with Frank Langella and Peter Sarsgaard. Now that's another one that had a surprising amount of emotion to the story. If you haven't seen it, check that one out too. The story is just short of 2 hours, and there were a few times that I felt the length. And I think mainly that was because portions of this are just the journey where we are watching Finch drive along the road, or when he stops for a moment to take a breather. While these scenes help to set up some humorous situations, they're not always as necessary to the narrative, and the info could be conveyed in a more efficient manner without losing any meaning. Hanks is obviously a superb actor, and he shows how talented he is by being able to take a simple character in a very simple story with very little external influences and make someone who is incredibly compelling and riveting to watch. A few times throughout this, Finch needs to convey an abstract concept to the robot, so to accomplish this, he tells a story. And in these moments, we really get to see Hank shine even more. His cadence is soothing and it's engaging. And just like the robot, I found myself wanting to hear more and more stories told. So overall, Finch is a slower and more dramatic buddy road trip movie. The story never dives into the darkness as much as it could, but I didn't mind because that allowed the narrative to focus more on the progression of those characters. Both Hanks and Jones are wonderful, each providing a level of connection and humanity, even though one of them isn't human. The film looks good, and the effects, whether they be practical or digital, all work to enhance the narrative and not be a distraction to it. The journey may be a little long, but the trip is ultimately satisfying. There's no sex, not really any nudity, some profanity, and no violence. I give Finch 4 out of 5 couches. So if you're going on a road trip, what's one thing that you absolutely must take with you? Let me know what it is in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.